The M4 MacBook Air came out to almost unanimous praise from reviewers, and I'd argue that it was well deserved at the time. Apple managed to not only deliver on a device that was unparalleled in terms of performance for the price, but also to redefine what the word blue actually means.
Where's the blue?
Where's the what?
The blue color.
I don't know, to my eye, it's kind of blue.
A little.
But it's not perfect. And having lived with it for the past 3 months now, there's a few things I feel like we need to talk about. So, before we get into this, I just wanted to clarify a few things. First of all, this is not an in-depth review of the M4 MacBook Air as a whole, but rather a look at some of the shortcomings that have only become apparent with prolonged use. If you want a video that goes over all the specs and so on, there are a bunch of those out there, including this stunning achievement in video making right here on this channel. So, what I will be going over in this video is bugs and glitches, the display, performance and thermal throttling, as well as whether I still think it's worth it. There are timestamps in the description below. The first thing I want to talk about is something that I haven't really seen anyone else mention online. Bugs.
Zed, we have a bug. So, what, we don't like bugs?
Look, Apple has over the years cultivated a certain reputation for making products that just work.
It just all works.
Sure, they might not be as customizable as other things on the market. The file management system is atrocious.
What the hell is that?
And whether we're talking tablets, phones, or computers, you're always a bit locked in to whatever limits Apple has decided to impose on you. But on the other hand, everything is super simple to use and it always works. Until it doesn't. And to be honest with you, I've experienced quite a lot of bugs on the M4 Air in just a few months. First of all, and most jarringly, I can't count how many times this thing has just restarted on its own. It's funny because in the lead up to buying this laptop, I was watching reviews of the M4 Mac Mini, and I noticed a lot of reviewers were defending the odd positioning of the power button by saying they never turn off their Mac anyway because the sleep mode is so good. Now, I'm an old school guy, so I've been conditioned to always turn off my computer anytime I'm done using it, but I was so swayed by all these reviewers that when I finally got my new MacBook, I decided to just put it in sleep mode whenever I was done using it. And it really felt fast, both when closing it, but also when opening it up to continue where I had left off, and honestly, I did love this feature. But then, one time I opened up my laptop to a message saying it had restarted because of a problem. Okay, no big deal, a little vague, but that can happen on any device. But then it happened again, and again, and again. Now, a little digging online told me that this issue might be caused by something I had installed on the Mac, but the only two apps I had actually installed at that time were Logic Pro and DaVinci Resolve. So I uninstalled both and reinstalled them, and it still kept happening. Now, for some reason, it hasn't happened quite as often in the last couple of weeks, but it does still occur at times, and it doesn't seem like I can do anything to fix it. Then there's the issue of my MacBook freezing entirely to the point where I have to force it to restart. Incidentally, the one time where it would be nice if my Mac would actually restart on its own. And this has only happened a couple of times, but strangely, it seems to happen not when I'm pushing the laptop to its limits, but rather when I'm doing something mundane like watching a video. And finally, there are the small things like the headphone jack not working until I, again, restart my MacBook, or file transfers just not going through for some reason.
It just all works.
Look, none of these things are deal breakers in their own right, but it definitely does take a bit of the shine off of what is otherwise meant to feel like a very premium product. And to be fair, I don't know if this is an issue with the M4 Air specifically or with mine in particular, but none of these things ever happened on my M1 Mac Mini, so I don't know. Maybe Apple partnered with Bethesda on the M4. Either way, you should definitely expect to run into some bugs when getting this thing. Before we move on, I wanted to take a quick moment to talk about the sponsor of today's video, keysfan.com. Keysfan is a site which sells digital keys to all kinds of software, and right now they're holding a massive sale on lifetime keys for Windows 10 and 11, as well as Microsoft Office packs for both PC and Mac. There's also several bundle deals, and you can use code ATS50 at checkout to get 50% off any Windows key, or code ATS62 to get 62% off any Microsoft Office pack. Keysfan has a 4.8 rating on Trustpilot, meaning they are incredibly reliable, and they also have a bunch of other stuff on their site, including games. So use the link in the description and get a great deal using one of my 2 coupon codes, which also helps to support the channel. And thanks again to Keysfan for sponsoring this portion of the video. Alright, next up is the display. And I'll be honest here, I still really like this display overall. The colors are great, the pixel density is amazing, the contrast is good, even the brightness, which goes up to 500 nits, is pretty much all you'll ever need, except in a few cases. And those cases, being direct sunlight, is where my only gripe with this display comes from. Look, the vast majority of the time, this display is more than bright enough. Even when you're sitting outside and the sun is shining, this thing still holds up remarkably well if you crank up the brightness all the way. But in those instances where the sun is reflecting directly onto your screen, and especially if you're trying to watch something that's a bit darker, like a nighttime scene in a movie, this thing becomes a goddamn mirror.
Take a look in that mirror. Now tell me who's the fairest.
Like, I get it, the screen being glossy is part of what makes it so good looking to begin with, and Apple being Apple, they would really like to upsell you to a Pro so you can get that nano texture display. But still, the reflectiveness does seem a little extreme at times. It's not too egregious, and in most cases it can be solved simply by moving a bit, but it's definitely worth noting, especially if you typically like to work in a place that has bright sunlight right behind you. So it's time to talk about performance. Now, I've made a point of praising the M4 Air for being essentially a more affordable Pro. But of course, in hindsight, that's not entirely true.
That's not entirely accurate.
I think a better way to describe it is that the M4 Air is not quite up to par with the current M4 Pro, but if you were to travel back in time just a couple of years, you could absolutely sell this as a high-end Pro machine. And given that computers weren't exactly trash a couple of years ago, that should tell you just how good the M4 Air actually is. However, with all that being said, there are some limitations here that I think it's important to talk about. Now, back when I first got this thing, I made a whole video about whether or not you could use the M4 Air for video editing. And while the answer is still a resounding yes, given that I've edited all of my videos on this thing since getting it, the performance does struggle a bit sometimes. In my initial testing, there were barely any hitches or lag when scrubbing through footage or playing back effects, but nowadays, I do find that even with the playback resolution set to half, there are occasions where it does stutter quite a bit. It's never bad outright, and it's something that's easily mitigated, but it is worth mentioning. Next, there's the issue of thermal throttling. And what I will say is this: I have yet to see my laptop overheat to the point where performance is seriously hindered, but it does seem to perform just a bit better when it's cold outside compared to when it's warm. Now again, I live in Scandinavia, so yay. And it's not something you would ever notice while doing everyday stuff like browsing the web or watching movies. But if you are trying to do something crazy like edit 2-hour-long 4K videos while visiting the pyramids in the middle of summer, then yeah, you're gonna feel the limitations of this laptop quite a bit. So ultimately, the big question is whether or not this laptop is still worth it. In other words, would I still buy it today knowing what I know now? Well, it's not quite the powerhouse that I initially thought it was, but it still performs extremely well, especially for its price range. You'll notice that I haven't said anything about the battery life yet, and that's because it has actually surpassed my expectations, if anything. Even with heavy use, I pretty much never have to plug this thing in to keep it charged, and I find myself easily going days without even thinking about the battery life. On top of that, the other good aspects of the MacBook Air also remain. It's extremely light and portable. unlike me. It doesn't make a single sound even when pushed to its limits, also unlike me. And it really is just an overall great device for the price. Speaking of which, I will say that this only really goes for the base model spec, maybe with a single upgrade here or there depending on your needs. But once you start speccing this thing up to a certain point, it becomes a worse deal in comparison to the Pro, which will also give you some quality of life improvements such as that amazing display. But outside of that, as long as you're aware of the limitations of this laptop, including the potential bugs and so on, and you're willing to live with that, then the M4 MacBook Air is still worth it. Alright, that's it for this video. If you're still on the fence about which MacBook to get, I do have a full video on that which you can find on my channel. And also, make sure to subscribe if you want to see more unbiased tech reviews. And I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace out.